I want you to close your eyes and imagine the perfect safety of your home on a stormy night. The wind howling outside, the comforting warmth of a fire inside. Tonight, I'll whisper a story that might follow you into your dreams. The story of a couple who received a knock on their door during a blizzard, and the terrible mistake they made when they opened it.
Dark Tales Whispered at Night.
The blizzard had been raging since dusk, a white curtain isolating Brian and Sarah from the rest of the world in their small, remote cabin. For them, it was a fortress. The fireplace crackled, a warm, living heart in the center of their home, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Outside, the wind howled like a hungry wolf. Inside, there was only the soft rustle of turning pages and the comforting weight of a shared blanket. Sarah looked up from her book, a contented smile on her face. "I could stay like this forever," she whispered. Brian squeezed her hand, his eyes not leaving his own page. "Me too." The world outside didn't exist. There was only them and the storm and the perfect, profound silence of their isolation. It was just after 11 p.m. when the silence was broken. A soft, rhythmic sound. It was so faint, so out of place, Brian thought he had imagined it. He looked up, his brow furrowed. "Did you hear that?" Sarah lowered her book, her expression confused. "Hear what?" The sound came again, a little louder this time, a polite but persistent tapping against the heavy oak of their front door.
Brian's body went rigid. A knot of primal fear tightened in his stomach. No one came to their cabin, especially not in a storm like this. The nearest road was a mile away, likely impassable. "Don't answer it," he said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. Who could possibly be out there? Sarah, however, was already moving, her face a mask of concern. "Brian, what if someone's car broke down? They could freeze to death." She crept to the door, her hand hovering over the peephole. "It's just 2 kids," she whispered back, her voice laced with disbelief. Brian joined her, his heart pounding. He squinted into the distorted fisheye lens. She was right. 2 children, a boy and a slightly older girl, stood on their porch. They were dressed in strange, dark, old-fashioned coats, far too thin for a blizzard. The snow swirled around them, but they didn't shiver. They just stood there, perfectly still, staring directly at the door. "Let us in," a small, flat voice said, muffled through the wood. "It's cold. We just need to use your phone." "No," Brian said, pulling Sarah back from the door. "Something's wrong. Their eyes. I can't see their eyes." Sarah looked at him, her compassion overriding his fear. "They're children, Brian. They're probably in shock. We can't just leave them out there." The girl's voice came again, devoid of any childish inflection, a calm, unnerving demand. "We need to come in. Our parents will be here soon." The way she said it wasn't a plea, it was a statement, a promise. A battle of wills began inside the cabin.
Sarah, driven by her instinct to help, argued that they were morally obligated to open the door. Brian, paralyzed by a deep, unexplainable dread, refused. He couldn't articulate why, but every instinct screamed at him that these were not normal children. He pointed to the security camera feed on his phone. The children stood unmoving, their faces pale discs in the grainy night vision. "They're not even trying to stay warm," he hissed. "They're just waiting." Sarah, seeing a tear roll down the boy's cheek on the screen, felt her resolve harden. "That's it. I'm not letting them die on our porch." She moved towards the door. "Sarah, no, don't!" Brian's voice was sharp, but she ignored him. She reached for the heavy deadbolt, her hands trembling. "We'll just let them in the entryway. They can get warm, use the phone, and wait for their parents." The boy outside seemed to sense her decision. He looked directly at the camera, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was a smile of triumph. Sarah's fingers closed around the cold metal of the chain lock. She hesitated for one last second. Then, with a soft, metallic slide, she undid the final barrier. The moment the chain was undone, a profound and immediate change occurred. The oppressive silence outside the door vanished, replaced by an even more terrifying quiet, as if the entire storm had suddenly held its breath. Sarah pulled the door open, just a crack. "You can come in. Just stay in the entryway." Her voice trailed off. The children stood there, their faces now fully visible in the warm light from the cabin. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, but their eyes were completely, utterly black. Not just the pupils, but the entire eye. Solid, depthless pools of ink that seemed to absorb the light around them, reflecting nothing. The girl looked at Sarah, and the blank, doll-like expression on her face cracked into a wide, unnatural smile. It was a smile that didn't belong on a child's face. It was ancient, predatory. "Thank you," she said, her voice no longer small and flat, but a low, guttural whisper that seemed to come from two places at once. "We knew you would let us in." Before Brian could scream, before Sarah could react, all the lights in the cabin flickered once, then died, plunging them into absolute darkness. The last thing they heard was not the storm, but the soft, deliberate sound of two sets of small feet stepping across their threshold. The next morning, the blizzard had passed, leaving the world blanketed in a pristine, silent layer of white. The sun sparkled on the untouched snow. The cabin stood silent, a dark shape in the bright landscape. The front door was wide open, a black rectangle against the white wood, swaying gently in the cold breeze. Two sets of small footprints led away from the open door, pressing deep into the fresh snow. They walked side by side, heading straight into the dense, dark woods.
The tracks continued for 50 yards, out into the middle of a vast, unbroken field of white. And then they just stopped. There was no other sign, no car tracks, no other footprints, no signs of a struggle. Just two perfect lines of tracks that ended in the middle of nowhere, as if the children who made them had simply vanished into the air. Of Brian and Sarah, there was no sign at all. The fire had long since died. The books lay open on the couch. On the welcome mat, just inside the open door, lay a single, old-fashioned black button, the kind that might have come from a child's winter coat.
If you've ever had an unexplainable, creepy encounter with a stranger, share your story below. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing in the storm is the one asking for shelter. If these whispers reached you tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. Until the next chill, good night, sweet dreams, where the whispers wait.